Some things don't haunt you because they're evil. They haunt you because they've been waiting. The first time he saw Diddy in the corner, he didn't panic. He apologized, like he was late to something only he could see. I'm a therapist. I work with actors, musicians, people who perform for the world and bleed in private. I've heard things most people aren't meant to hear, but nothing like this. Terrence Howard came to me calm, clear. He wasn't losing his mind. He was losing the room around him. He said something was following him, something familiar, something that wore a trusted face and waited in the dark. This story begins with a man asking for help, but it ends with the presence that was waiting for him to notice. This story is true. Not true in the way people mean when they want to scare you, not based on real events or stretched out for effect. I'm telling you what happened, exactly as it happened. And if you've never worked with the kind of people I have, you might not believe it. That's fine. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't been there. I'm a therapist. I work with high-profile clients, actors, musicians, public figures, people whose faces you've seen 1,000 times, but whose real selves are rarely allowed to surface. They come to me when the image cracks, when the applause fades, when they start to feel like they're living inside someone else's body. Most of them are dealing with trauma, addiction, identity, things that make sense, even if they hurt. But a few times in my career, I've heard something else, something I wasn't trained for, something that doesn't fit into a diagnosis. This is one of those stories. I live a quiet life, 42, never married, no kids, no pets. I like routine. My espresso machine gets more attention than most people do. My apartment's clean, my calendar's full. The silence in my life isn't lonely, it's controlled. That silence is what allows me to do what I do, to listen without flinching, to hold space when everything inside someone else starts to fall apart. And for years, that balance worked. Until I met Terrence Howard. The name came through a referral, same as always. No big email thread, no studio involvement. Just a call, a time, and a voice that said, he needs someone who won't ask stupid questions. He scheduled a private consultation. No entourage, no PR filter, just him. I booked the appointment for a Thursday, 3:30 p.m. That whole week I felt off, nothing dramatic. Just a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain, like I was supposed to remember something I hadn't learned yet. I told myself I was projecting, that I was anticipating a classic celebrity unraveling, a scandal, a confession, a carefully disguised cry for help. What I got instead was silence. Terrence walked in right on time. No sunglasses, no mask, no performance, just stillness, the kind that takes up space. He sat down, folded his hands, and said something I'll never forget. Something's been following me. It doesn't talk. It doesn't move, but I see it, and it sees me. I asked if it was a person. He shook his head. Number. But it looks like someone I know. I asked who. He said the name without blinking. Diddy. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't a breakdown. It was something much, much worse. The first session started like any other. Terrence sat across from me, his posture perfect. No sunglasses, no phone in his hand, no restless fidgeting, just stillness. He wasn't guarded, but he wasn't open either. It felt like he was holding something in his hands that he couldn't put down yet. He looked tired, but not in a way rest could fix. Existentially tired. Like someone who's been holding their breath too long and isn't sure how to exhale anymore. I let the silence sit. He broke it gently. You ever feel like something's watching you? Not to scare you, but to study you? I didn't answer. Sometimes it's better to wait. He kept talking. I started seeing someone 3 months ago, maybe more. At first I thought it was just a lookalike. You know, one of those weird moments where someone catches your eye because they resemble somebody else. But then it happened again and again. He wasn't telling a story. He was describing a pattern. Same guy, every time, same suit, same expression. Always standing at a distance, never moving, just present. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't even afraid. Not the way people usually are when they talk about being followed. He was calm, flat, like he'd accepted it. I asked if he recognized the man. He nodded once, like it was an afterthought. Diddy, he said it like he was reading a name off a file. No anger, no confusion, just the truth. At first I saw him across the street from a coffee shop, end of the block. I blinked and he was gone. Next day outside my trailer on set, then in the reflection of a store window when I passed by. I asked if the figure ever moved, approached, spoke. He shook his head. Number, and that's the part that makes it worse. He's not trying to scare me. He's not doing anything. He's just there. And every time I turn a corner, it's like he already knew I was coming. He looked around the room, scanned the windows, the corners. I started changing my routine. No more mirrors in the house. I sit with my back to the wall, where I can see every exit. I drive different streets home. Doesn't matter. I asked him how he was feeling now, in the moment. He looked me in the eye for the first time since he sat down. I know how it sounds. I nodded slowly, keeping my tone neutral. But inside, something twisted. Not because of what he said, because of how he said it. No fear, no confusion, just clarity. Like he'd already moved past wondering if he was crazy and had found something far worse waiting on the other side. I asked why he decided to talk to someone now. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Because last night I saw him across the street from my house. He didn't disappear. I paused. What did he do? Terrence's eyes didn't blink. He waved. I've always had rules. Professional boundaries. When the session ends, it ends. No digging. No late night research. No Googling clients out of curiosity or concern. That kind of thing breaks trust. Blurs the line between empathy and obsession. But after that session with Terrence, the line didn't just blur, it disappeared. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, because I couldn't stop thinking. Something about the way he said it, he waved, kept playing in my head. Not as a warning, but as a shift. Like the presence had crossed a threshold, and Terrence knew it. By morning, I was already in front of my laptop. I didn't search for Terrence. I searched for Diddy. What started as idle curiosity turned into something else, a kind of quiet spiral. I wasn't chasing conspiracy theories. I was looking for patterns, clues, things that might explain what Terrence was experiencing without labeling him delusional. And then I saw it. A phrase buried deep in an old forum thread. Freak off. It came up again in an archive podcast, then in a few scattered Reddit comments, always in quotes, like people were afraid to say it too directly. The details were vague, purposefully vague. No photos, no lists, just whispers. Private parties, no phones, no press. Invitations you don't ask for. Staff wear masks, soundproof walls. Rooms you don't enter unless you're told to. What chilled me wasn't the secrecy. It was what came after. People who attended changed. The word different came up again and again. Not worse, not traumatized, just different. Some of the names attached to those whispers didn't surprise me. Others did. One thread mentioned Justin Bieber. Someone said, "You can see it in his eyes." Another person posted side-by-side photos. Young Justin, bright-eyed and messy. Older Justin, quieter, heavier in the face, but lighter in the eyes. Not aged, not tired, emptied. A comment below that stuck with me. Giving up your integrity leaves marks, not the kind that fade. Terrence had said something like that too, about people who go to those parties and don't come back the same, about how pretending too long can invite something in, something that waits for you to forget who you really are. The deeper I dug, the less it felt like research. It felt like eavesdropping on something I wasn't meant to know. But I didn't stop, because the more I read, the more I understood something terrifying. Terrence wasn't trying to figure out what was following him. He already knew. He just wanted to understand why it chose him and how long he had left before it stopped waiting. It was a Tuesday when Terrence came back. 3 weeks had passed since our last session. I hadn't heard from him in the meantime. Not unusual, especially with clients who carry things they can't always face head on. But when he walked through my door, I knew something had shifted. He looked thinner, not physically, but in energy, like part of him had been stretched too far and never snapped back into place. His clothes were fine, pressed, even elegant, but he wore them like armor now, not style. He sat down without a word. His hands were tight fists in his lap, his eyes scanning the corners of the room, not for danger, but for confirmation, like he expected something to already be there. I gave him space, let the silence breathe. Eventually he spoke. He's getting closer. His voice wasn't shaky, but it had a weight to it, not panic, pressure. Before, it was always at a distance, outside, across the street, reflections, places I could ignore if I tried hard enough. He paused. Now, I don't have to see him to know he's there. I asked what he meant. I feel him in the room, in moments like this. He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes locked just over my shoulder, like he was watching something I couldn't see. It's not like before, he said. There's no pattern now, no warning. He's just here. I glanced back, reflex. Of course, nothing was there, but the space behind me felt heavier than it should have. Terrence leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice dropped to a whisper, like speaking too loudly might invite something in. I don't know what he wants, but I think he's waiting for something to fall apart. I asked him if he still saw Diddy, physically, visually. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, same face, same suit, same stillness. But now it's not just about seeing him. He looked up at me for the first time. It's about feeling when he's near. There was a silence between us then, thick and fragile. The kind of silence that doesn't settle. It lingers. After a few moments, he reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet pouch on the table between us. I found this on my pillow one morning, he said. Don't know how it got there. Didn't open it. Didn't throw it away either. He slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. He stood up slowly, took a few steps toward the door, then stopped. Do you feel it too? He asked. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, because I wasn't sure anymore. He left without saying another word. I sat in the quiet office, staring at that pouch, listening to nothing, but feeling something I couldn't name. And that was the first time I started to wonder if whatever followed him in had decided not to leave. I left the pouch untouched. I told myself it was just a prop, a physical symptom of Terrence's spiraling perception, a stand-in for guilt or fear or whatever trauma he hadn't named yet. But I didn't throw it away. I couldn't. Instead, I buried myself in research again. Not out of clinical curiosity this time, but because I was starting to believe that whatever Terrence was wrapped up in, it had layers, and he wasn't the only one caught in it. I went deeper, past the interviews and award shows, past the sanitized headlines, into the back alleys of the internet where things aren't polished, just raw, fragmented, and sometimes far too specific to be made up. One clip I found was an interview with The Game. He said he partied with Diddy for almost 2 years. No music was recorded, no tracks released, Just luxury trips, high-end hotels, and silence. He smiled when he said it, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then there was MGK, Machine Gun Kelly. He described Diddy's world as something that didn't feel human. Like a walking corporation, he said. Not a person, just power-wearing skin. The language wasn't literal, but it felt true. Next, I stumbled across a name that kept resurfacing. Stevie J. He'd been tied to Diddy for years, part of his inner circle. He was named in lawsuits more than once. Allegations involving coercion, parties, and people who didn't consent to the version of reality they walked into. But Stevie never backed away from Diddy. In fact, when questioned, he defended him with something close to rage. 50 Cent clapped back online, throwing out cryptic jabs, laughing in public, but under the jokes, there was something sharp, personal. And then I found a man named Jonathan Oy, a name most people wouldn't recognize. He used to work for Diddy, quiet, behind the scenes, logistics, transportation, event coordination. Jonathan accused Diddy of spreading STDs through circles of unprotected underground encounters. Said it wasn't negligence, it was ritual. He also said Rick Ross was sent to silence him, not with violence, with contracts. NDA after NDA, threats disguised as negotiations. Jonathan claimed DJ Khaled and Ross weren't just guests at Diddy's private parties. He said they were personally involved. He never explained what that meant. But the comments below the video tried to. Some believed him. Others called him crazy. But everyone agreed on one thing. Nobody talks like that unless they have nothing left to lose. Reading those comments, watching those clips, it didn't feel like I was uncovering a mystery. It felt like I was standing at the edge of a room I was never supposed to know existed. And the door was cracked open just enough to hear someone breathing on the other side. Terrence didn't schedule his next visit, he just showed up. It was a little after noon on a Thursday. I was finishing a session when I heard the door slam downstairs. Fast, urgent, not angry, afraid. When I came out to check, he was already in the waiting area, standing, pacing, his jacket half zipped, eyes flicking from wall to wall, like the room itself was moving around him. I asked him if everything was okay. He didn't answer, just walked past me into my office, like he didn't have time to wait for permission. He sat down hard, hands gripping the arms of the chair like he was trying to keep himself anchored. No greeting, no small talk, just a whisper. He's here. The words barely reached me, but the tone hit like a cold draft. Not dramatic, not delusional, just certain. I sat across from him, slow and steady, trying not to mirror the panic in his body. "You're feeling the presence again?" He nodded, eyes locked on something just past my shoulder. "Not feeling," he said. "Seeing." He swallowed, hard. He's standing in the corner, same suit, same face, same stillness, like he's not even alive, just present. I glanced behind me. Nothing there, just my bookshelf, a plant, a framed certificate. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was right, and I wasn't allowed to see it. Terrence started breathing faster. Not loud, but sharp. Each inhale like it cost him something. He's not like a ghost. Ghosts pass through, this thing waits. I asked him what he thought it was waiting for. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. "I think it's watching. For the moment I stop pretending, everything is okay." His voice cracked, not from emotion, but exhaustion. I tried to push it away, tried to stay grounded, but it's like the more I try to hold on, the closer it gets, like it feeds on the effort. I offered him grounding exercises, breathing techniques, even offered to turn the lights up or open the window. He shook his head. It won't help. He's not afraid of light. He's not afraid of anything. He just wants to be here when it finally happens. I asked him gently what it was. Terrence didn't answer, but he looked at me then, really looked. And in his eyes, I didn't see fear. I saw grief. The kind you feel before the loss. He stood up suddenly, knocking the chair back. I moved to help, but he raised a hand, calm, polite, like he was trying not to disturb something else in the room. I shouldn't have come. He walked to the door, paused once, and said, "You can't see him, can you?" I didn't respond, because even though I couldn't see anything, something in the room felt heavier than it had before, and when the door closed behind him, that weight didn't go with him. It stayed. The pouch sat on my desk for 3 days before I touched it. It was small, velvet, and strangely heavy for its size. I didn't ignore it. I didn't forget. I saw it every time I reached for my pen, every time the light shifted just enough to catch it in the corner of my eye. I didn't touch it out of caution, not fear, caution. Because whatever Terrence left in that pouch, it wasn't just a keepsake, it was a message. And once I opened it, I knew there'd be no unknowing what was inside. On the 4th day, I gave in. The pouch held 3 things: a printed photo, grainy, low-res of Diddy and Jay-Z at the BET Lifetime Achievement Awards, a USB drive, and a small note handwritten in tight, careful script. I didn't sell. That's why it's still here. The photo at first looked ordinary. 2 men, arms around each other, both smiling. Jay-Z was mid-speech, Diddy beside him, clapping. If you'd never heard Terrence's story, it would have meant nothing, but I had. And when I looked closely, I saw what he wanted me to see. Jay's smile didn't reach his eyes. There was something in his posture, just a fraction too rigid. Something behind the expression, like he was performing a version of himself, not for the cameras, for someone else, someone behind them. I picked up the USB next, plugged it into my laptop. It held a single file. Footage you don't see. It was 5 minutes long. A different angle of the same BET tribute, backstage footage, shot on a phone, maybe hidden. Jay-Z was finishing his speech, talking about family, about how Diddy once asked him to skip his daughter's recital for a show, and he did. That line got a laugh from the crowd. Then came the moment Terrence must have been waiting for someone else to see. Jay steps off the stage. The applause fades, and his face changes. It's not dramatic, not a collapse, just a flicker. A second-long shift, like the real Jay steps out from behind the mask, just to catch a breath. He turns to someone off camera, someone we never see, and he says one word, "Okay." Then he walks away, not triumphant, not celebratory, just gone. I don't know why that moment hit me so hard, but it did. Because that single word, "okay," wasn't casual. It wasn't reflexive. It sounded like permission, like an answer. The rest of that night was quiet, but I didn't sleep. Not because of what I saw, because of what it confirmed. Terrence wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't unraveling. He was surviving something most people wouldn't recognize until it was already too late. And maybe he left that pouch not as a cry for help, but as a warning for someone like me. In the weeks that followed, I kept an eye on him. Not through tabloids, through science blogs, obscure interviews, clips buried in YouTube channels with less than 1,000 views. Terrence wasn't acting anymore. He was talking about reality, energy, geometry, unified field theory. At first, I thought it was a breakdown in a new direction, but the more I listened, the more I realized he was building a language to explain what he'd seen, to contain it, to stay sane. I sent him a package, no return address, just a book, The Holographic Universe, one we had mentioned briefly, back when this still felt like therapy. Inside the front cover, I wrote, "You were right, you're not alone." A month later, I got an email, no subject, no signature, just one line. I kept my man card, that was it. And I understood. He didn't give in. He didn't trade pieces of himself away for peace or power. He didn't become another silent, smiling face standing next to something no one dares question. He saw the thing, he felt it, and he didn't blink. That's survival in a world like his. Some people get pulled in and forget who they are. Others hold on just enough to remember what they could have lost. Whatever it is that follows those who get too close, who pretend too long, it doesn't always need to touch you. Sometimes it just waits to see if you'll offer yourself up willingly. Terrence didn't, and maybe that's why it stayed with him. Not to claim him, to witness him. And now, maybe, it's watching me too.